Hi, I'm John Nixon from Eagle Lake Woodworking, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made this oak blanket chest. Some of the notable features include dovetailed construction, exposed spline joints, a hint of arts and crafts style influence with the arched base, and the subtle differences in the contrasting woods that make up the lid. I'll show you how I installed a lid support system, as well as a full mortise lock set. This is the kind of item that would look great in any house, and I really enjoyed building it. Let me show you how it's made. The first thing I need to do is prepare the stock for the sides, front, and back of the blanket chest. I clean up one edge on the joiner, and then move over to the table saw and cut the board to width. Each side is made up of two boards, and I pick the most pleasing grain match between the two boards. I mark every 6 inches for biscuit slots that will help keep the boards aligned during the glue up. I'll spread yellow glue on the edge of both boards, as well as in the biscuit slot and on the biscuit themselves. I used a series of clamps across the width of the board, as well as a few cauls to keep the board flat during the glue up. After the panels have dried, I send them through the wide drum sander and bring them to a uniform thickness. I've installed a guide bushing in the router table, and I'll be using a dovetail template from MLCS Woodworking to cut the dovetails. The workpiece is clamped to the templates, and I move it into the spinning router bit, and it's guided by the fingers of the template, and the dovetails are cut. With the dovetails cut, I trace their location onto the adjoining board and fill in that area with chalk. This way, when I'm mounting the angled finger of the dovetail template to the board, I know where to create the sockets. For this, we use a straight bit and remove the material between the angled fingers to create a socket for the dovetail. Nice, crisp, clean sockets. After a successful dry fit, I mark the adjoining sides. And then with chalk, I outline the area where I need to create a dado for the bottom portion of the box to fit into. I purposely made the location of the dado fit in between two of the dovetails. The only thing you have to be careful of is when you're coming out the backside, to stop before you reach the end of the board so that you don't potentially damage the dovetails. Now we can't do this on the board with the pins, so I'll use the motorized router lift to bring the bit up into the work and create a stopped dado. So I start with the board over the bit, and then with the foot pedal raise the spinning bit up into the work and create a dado. Again, the thing I need to be aware of is stopping before I exit out the backside. The bottom's made up of 1/2 inch plywood, which I cut to length and width on the table saw. Now is a good time to sand the inside of the box before you assemble it. I put masking tape on the inside of all the joints to help with the glue squeeze out. To start the assembly, I spread yellow glue inside of the sockets of one of the sides. And then I insert the tails into those sockets. And I repeat the procedure for the next long side of the blanket chest. With 3 of the sides together, it's time to insert the bottom panel. With that panel in place, I can spread yellow glue in the sockets of the last 2 remaining joints and put on the 4th side. You can see how putting masking tape on the inside of the box really helps eliminate any cleanup you need to do. After the box is dried, I sand down the pins and tails that were left purposely proud of the adjoining surface so that I get a perfectly flush side. The lid is made up of a center panel that has a mitered frame all the way around the outside. To laminate the center panel, I use my shop-made laminate press that clamps to my workbench. The panel is made up of 3/4 inch plywood and panel material that's about 3/16 of an inch thick that has quarter sawn white oak veneer applied to it. I use an upholstery stapler on the very end to keep things aligned during glue up. The laminate press is pretty simple. The workpiece goes in, and another piece of sheet good goes on top, and then I tighten everything down and leave it in there for about 24 hours. After the panel dries, I rip it to width and cut it to length on the table saw. Next, I cut a groove in all 4 sides of the panel. Just keep the good face down for all the cuts. It's this groove that will receive a spline that connects the frame and the panel. The frame material has been planed to the exact same thickness as the center panel, and it also receives a groove. I cut the first miter on the frame piece and then clamp it to the panel and mark the other side where the miter needs to be. With my miter jig on the other side of the table saw blade, I cut the second miter. I work my way around the panel, fitting each miter together. I cut a groove in the mitered end of the frame pieces, which will receive a spline as well. I cut thin strips for spline material at the table saw. Here's the layout of the splines. There's a spline that connects the center panel to all 4 sides, as well as a spline that joins each miter together.